Okay, so this week, like I said, we're starting with two different chapters and two completely different fields. One is schools, and that's the lecture that I'm going to record for Thursday. The other one is faith-based agencies, and that's one we're going to be talking a little bit about today. And we're gonna dive into both of those. It's like two totally different environments. I know some of you have some experience with schools, not only as a parent, but also maybe working in schools and things like that. Once you get to the schools, there's all kinds of different rules that apply. A lot of things out there. So the stuff in your book and the things that you will be responsible for on the test are really only like the surface layer. I mean, schools have their own like policy and stuff, and it's like this thick, I mean, it can get crazy at times. Am I right? Yeah. So I don't know about your policy book, Hope, but like mine's actually that thick. It's crazy. But schools can be kind of like their own separate beast. So remember that the information that you're going to see there in your book is kind of like just an overview, like this class is. It doesn't really dive down deep in the weeds on a lot of things, but that's okay because it does give you a really good idea of human services in schools. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and try and start talking about a few things here. We have today, if this actually works. Today we're going to talk about religion, spirituality, faith-based agencies, and how all this comes together, the intersection with human services. Now, first of all, the whole reason why this is important, or could anybody tell me why you think dealing with faith-based agencies and religion, spirituality, why would this be important when it comes to human services?
Because a lot of people, based on their reactions and how they live their life based on their spirituality and religion.
That is true. In fact, in 2018, 90% of all Americans reported believing in a higher power. And that number actually grows if you go worldwide. And now when I say higher power, that's not exactly defined. It's defined in different ways. Out of that 90%, 50% of them, would identify with the Christian God. 32% are, Jewish, Muslim, different religions there, formal religions, or kind of in the kind of agnostic, where they would say, believe in a higher power, just not exactly sure. When it comes down to it, only 9% of the U.S. population is atheist. That's actually a little bit more than worldwide. Worldwide, 7%, less than 7% of the world population identify as atheist. The reason this is important is because you can get all sorts of different community groups that would be based around a religious identity. For example, there's in Michigan, there's a very large Muslim population that is there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But as we get to the kind of the intersection of all this, first of all is to define like religiousness and spirituality. Could anyone give me an example of those definitions? It's not like, I mean, you're not here in chairs, you know what I mean? We're not like hanging out or walking around. So it's very awkward. Jessica, could you give me a definition of like religiousness versus spirituality?
For me, religiousness, and I may be wrong, is kind of, there's a more of a regiment to it, or like a structure, and spirituality is more of like an all-encompassing of like, I have beliefs, but they're not necessarily rigid or conforming to something specific.
Yes, that's and that's very good. That actually kind of gets if you kind of think of it, when you look in the dictionary, you'll have some words that have, they'll have several different definitions, definition A for it, B, or whatever as you go through. And you really nailed, like, especially that first part of the religiousness. Religiousness can refer to structured religion. It can also refer to a social and cultural religious framework. And that's some of the ways that your book is referring to it: a social and cultural religious framework. And that's so that could be where someone may not be a devout adherent to a belief, but maybe they attend religious functions because they feel it might be expected of them, or they maybe just go for the potlucks, because there's always that that macaroni salad that people bring, or the potato salad, and they're like, hey, I'm going to go and make sure that I'm at every social function that's there. So this would be more of a social and cultural religious framework. And then spirituality would be an independent relationship with a deity, or whether identified deity or not, higher power, involving a search for the sacred. And so this comes to the other part of your definition, where you kind of differentiated there, where spirituality, it may be more on a personal level, and that one may not be as formal. So with these two, it does mean that you can be both spiritual and religious. So that would be someone who is a devout adherent to a formal structure. So those two kind of combine. And the other thing that's kind of thrown into this is kind of the overall definition of faith, believing in something. And the truth is, when it comes down to it, I mean, everyone really does believe in something, even if it's, an atheist who has a naturalistic worldview. I mean, they have a worldview, and that's, the way they perceive the world. A Christian, Jew, Muslim, everyone has their own specific worldview that can be determine their faith. That is what they, that is what they believe in. It may or may not be a formalized religion, but there are many spiritual components to it. Now we got like that kind of that out of the way. We move on into like now getting into the faith-based agency. So kind of like this is where it matters along the personal part. But what is a faith-based agency? And I probably shouldn't have had the pictures up there, because that just kind of tells you right there, right? Can anyone give me some examples? I know I got some pictures here, but can anybody give me some examples of some faith-based agencies, some specific faith-based agencies that you may know of in your community?
The House of Ruth, one of them.
House of Ruth, that is one. Very good. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Do you know much about that?
I don't know too much about it, other than it's faith-based. And honestly, the only reason I do know about it is because my sister was there. Mm-hmm. And what she described to me was they do attend church. When she was there, it was a couple years ago. I don't know if they do this anymore, but they used to, like I said, I don't know if they do anymore, do help around the community. She said one time they went and cleaned up the Roberts Park here in town, and cleaned up like the other little parks. They do things like that. I don't know if they do anymore. It was just things that she was telling me about it. They went on a trip to Tennessee one year, I think. Mm-hmm. It was a faith thing. I really don't know about all of it, but they do different things like that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is centered around normally a formal belief system, normally. And when we're talking faith-based, when it comes to human services, it is really going to differentiate some things when it comes to funding, which we're going to talk about later. Mm-hmm. And also, what are the pros and cons of working with faith-based agencies? So we've talked we kind of touched on the fact, is a client's, faith or spirituality important when addressing these issues or addressing services. And Amy brought up that, a lot of people do have deeply held beliefs. And so it can be important in this. And in fact, if you look at certain things such as, I don't know if anyone might be familiar with AA and 12 steps, but with the with 12-step program, belief in a higher power is, that's step one, and it's kind of essential in moving forward in that. It's recognizing some form of spirituality. It does not have to be defined in certain ways, but it is a recognition of a higher power. So in this aspect, Amy's right. There are a lot of people who have deeply held belief, and it's a good idea to be aware of that when you're dealing with clients, but especially when you're talking about addressing some services. There are also some other things that will come out. Let's say that the client, one good thing that, or one thing that will come up is the matter of money, insurance. So many faith-based agencies and operate in different ways. So, for example, some places like some transitional housing places like Crossroads, House of Ruth, those type of places, they're not going to take insurance, but many times they don't charge either. Some places do, but for example, some of those places that I mentioned, they don't charge. They may accept a donation, but they work with some private funding and some things like that. So in that way, it's actually for some people, that is another reason why choosing a faith-based service is very important, is because, hey, at the end of the day, they can afford it. There are some others. In fact, I can think of Brianna's Hope, which does fund for people to go to rehab or a rehab center if they need to go for like a 28-day stay, and they don't have insurance. Now, some places will get them insurance when they get in there, but not every place does that. And so one of the things that Brianna's Hope will do is they will fundraise privately so that they can send somebody to a place, because they feel it's more important to to address the timing. If someone's ready to go ahead and send them, and then other matters can be dealt with later. But there are some faith-based agencies that will do those sorts of things. So there's all kinds of different things in the mix there. Now the big question then becomes, okay, so if that's what faith-based agencies do, well, why is it important for a human services professional to be competent to know these other faiths and to know what some of these agencies do? Why do you think it's important for a human service professional to know even faiths that they may or may not be familiar with? Why is it important to know what Hinduism is? Why is it important to know what Buddhism is? What Christianity and Islam and Judaism? Why is it important to know these things?
So you don't inadvertently insult your client.
Yeah, that's very true. Very, very true.
One could be, you can familiarize yourself with those. That way, if one of your clients does have that sort of background, you know how to go about it in a way that wouldn't upset them. I guess that goes with what Amy said.
Yeah, that's true. Now also think that human service professionals, when we approach things, we approach it from this strengths-based approach. Finding strengths, when we're looking at a person, it's not only personal strengths, but strengths in their support system. So looking at that, you can also say that there are, if someone is a member of a belief system, maybe they have a strength that is a support system that they have not that they have not seen, they have not activated yet because, because of one reason or another. And it has to do with their, with their faith or their religion. One way that this is very apparent is you can see in a lot of Muslim communities, uh, the mosque itself is often very active in care for its members and adherents, and will often do things for them in the community, apart from just community outreach and things like that, but remains like a very, very solid a place for them to connect, place for them to tap into certain services, whether it's something like a food bank, or it may be connecting them with someone that can help with English. It may be connecting someone with employment or something like that. So faith centers actually become areas where people who are like-minded can go and receive some support. And so knowing this and knowing their belief system, you can help get them contacted in certain areas. Now, the reason I have up there with like Western culture versus Eastern culture, there's also another thing to think of when you go in and you look at this. Number one, we're all from like a Western culture here, and a Western culture has what's called an individualistic mindset, an individualistic worldview, which means, can anyone tell me what that means? Okay, so a individualistic worldview would hold that the individual is more important than the group. We talk about an individual having rights, an individual being able to make choices apart from maybe family or community or friends. We are in Western culture, we're very big into self-determination. Eastern culture, many Eastern cultures are not this way. It's actually kind of flipped, or more of what's called a group-centered culture. And in this, it means that the group is more important than the individual. Now, this is very important because in America, we have all sorts of groups that come in. And so you might be dealing with a number of groups. And there are some, there are several cultures that are like this. Notably, many Middle Eastern cultures are this way. There are a number of other Eastern cultures. There are some Latin American cultures that are this way as well. The groupthink culture says, okay, the group is actually more important than the individual. So the individual then has this this worldview, this lens that they're looking through that says, okay, decisions that I make reflect on the group. And so because I don't want to reflect poorly on the group, even if I want to do X, I will still choose Y because that is what the group expects of me. Now, in some ways, we think, okay, this could be bad. In some ways, it can be good. But the other thing is that this also plays into the strength-based thing. The Eastern culture with the group mindset will normally have more group supports that you're able to find. And also this intersection of faith and human services. The thing to remember always is to remain client-centered while incorporating any spirituality. Can anybody tell me what that means?
You keep the client's views and be respecting of it, and don't push your own views on them.
Right. And that's exactly it. You don't ever push your views upon them. The other thing that I forgot to mention about Western and Eastern cultures, especially when it comes to religion, spirituality, and faith-based services and everything, is in Western cultures, we tend to not talk about religiousness and spirituality in the open. It's kind of considered a taboo subject, hey, let's not talk politics and religion and all this other stuff, right? Actually, in many Eastern cultures, it's expected. So to for someone to bring that out is not, they would see that as perfectly normal. So it's something that you can expect, particularly in working with different cultures. Now, so let's move on to the money part. Faith-Based Community Initiatives Act. This is in there. Oh my goodness. Is that a test question? I don't know. Yes. It is. I don't know if I have it on the study guide, so I decided to put it in here. I was like, you know what? I'm going to make sure we got that in there. So if you have your pencil and paper, jot that one down. The Faith-Based Community Initiative Act is what enabled faith-based organizations to receive federal funding. It's also called the Charitable Services Act. So let me ask you a question. Why, the government already gives money to certain services and programs to get them going. Why, what would be the rationale to then give money to faith-based organizations that would address some of the same problems? Anybody think of why?
Because they have the same issues and concerns.
Yeah, same issues and concerns. Actually, the reason they did this is because started looking at the thing, and they stepped back and looked at it from a more practical point of view and said, the reality is the need is far greater than government services and government programs can address. And the need is far greater than what faith-based services and programs can address. And so they said, well, if we give funding to both, I mean, everybody's, fighting the same problems, and also some different ideas. You're pulling from a different field, so different ideas will arise. And so that was the thinking behind it. And then, of course, they have some regulations on that and everything else. That was the thinking behind it, and it's actually kind of become sort of the norm. So many faith-based initiatives can get funding to address certain needs in certain ways. For this, when you're looking at this, say you are looking at it, say you're working at an agency and you're looking to find services for an individual, or actually, no, say that you are researching, being able to refer to some places, and you want to make sure you found a faith-based place, and you're like, okay, I don't know if this place is going to be objective, or if they're going to do what's called proselytizing, which is where they would put their beliefs alone on someone. So what you do is you would go and check out like the mission statement of a place, and if they have like some direct proselytizing efforts in their mission statement, then they're probably not going to get federal funding. And that would be something, to bring up, to your team in a team meeting and say that, and say, hey, so this place is probably not going to receive federal funding because they do proselytizing. It's just an FYI on building some resources for a place. The truth is that since the need is so great that both faith-based organizations and human services, I mean, they can work together in many ways, and they can be friends. There's all sorts of community groups where professionals from all around the spectrum will get together. Partnership for Drug-Free Wayne County is one. There's another one that, oh my goodness, I'm actually going to it this on Friday, and I totally forgot the name. I better remember that. But there's several where they will gather people from across the spectrum. The benefits of faith-based services, of working with some faith-based services in the community, can anybody think of some?
Almost all are welcome. There's no judgment usually on who shows up.
Okay.
They'll help anybody and everybody.
And if there is, that's probably not the place you want to work with, right? So Jessica, can you think of any other benefits working with a faith-based service? Oh, you're on mute.
I'll say a lot of people donate to things that are faith-based when they're part of a church community, so they might have extra funding from the public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. It's actually one thing I've written down here. You know, religious coping has been found to provide more benefits than other just like base coping methods that a person might have on their own. This is actually in your book. There's a discussion on this on page 284. I want to familiarize yourself with that. Also, the positives of seeing you know, higher power as a source of strength, support. Also, the like you said, the perception of the faith-based community, and there's maybe there's some initiatives there, some programs there that they can that people can utilize. As far as looking at it from the perspective of a HUMS worker yourself, there's a couple of things that you need to remember. Is always think practically. Okay. Some other benefits that you have working with any faith-based organization, and you know, whether it's Jewish, Muslim, Christian, anything, is you will have access to these practical things: building, a parking lot, kitchen, and a volunteer base. So, for example, say you want to set up, you know, say that you work for WIC, and the county that you serve is rather large and it has several outlying rural areas. To set up a branch office where you might be at for a day, one thing you might do is look for a church that might be centrally located. And that church would have everything that you need, you know, building, restrooms, everything else. And maybe you could go there for a half day a week so that some residents who don't have access to public transportation could then meet with you there. This might be, this has been actually done in many places. So, but this is one example of being able to utilize a building as a basically a common meeting ground for a community center. There are some guidelines that have to be followed in some areas, but if you initiate the conversation or just basically are looking for something as you know, as a bonus that you can use, these are some of the benefits to working with faith-based services. Now, Jessica mentioned, you know, normally, or as Amy mentioned, normally places are going to be open and welcoming, but that's something where you just do your homework and you go and talk to people. And if they're not that way, I mean, hey, some people aren't that way, you know. Then, like I said, that's obviously some place that you don't want to work with. But normally, there are a lot of places that are open to working with human services agencies in any way that they can. So here's a big primer on world religions, and trust me, there's a lot to them, as you can probably tell. But we're going to try and do this in 5 minutes. So with Judaism, the key term that you need to know is tzedakah. It is giving to the disadvantaged. Poverty is considered a natural state, so so giving is something that seeing that we are obliged to do. Now, one reason why that's underlined is because that's on the test too. So if you want to write that down, that there are a couple of things with each of these that we'll see. Second one that we look at is Christianity, and the key term there would be social gospel, and that is the concept of shows you love for God by loving your neighbor, by being involved, working with working social justice and addressing issues that that are hazards in your community. Now, I forgot to give you an example. Let's see. I'm sorry. Back to Judaism. One thing that you will find is that a lot of Judaism outreach and stuff. There's a great example in your book. They also have some excellent schools and services for autistic children. They've really come around that population really big, and normally that's open to people of any faith. So that's one. They have a very high rate of community care. The Association of Jewish Families and Child Agencies offers many services, and the nice thing is no one is denied because of an inability to pay. A good example that's brought up for social gospel in your book is Chuck Colson with the Prison Fellowship Ministry, and their central value is that the belief that no one is beyond hope, and so they lobbied to bring some more safety to prisons, also to try to eliminate prison rape. They do the Angel Tree program, and they lean towards programs that will reduce recidivism and things like that. It's a great example, and that one, there's a little bit of that in your book. Also with Islam, key term there is zakat. This one might be on your test. It is the giving to the poor. There is a mandatory tithing of 1/40th of your income in Islam. It's one of the basic 5 tenets. The Islamic Circle of North America does outreach, food pantry, education, and they don't do this just to Muslims. They do this, to anybody. And so that's one of the outreaches, one example of outreach that you can find in the Islamic community. Also, just as a side note, there are many people who have, I don't know if anyone here wonders about things like head coverings in either Islam or Muslim communities, or even in Middle Eastern communities. So there's a couple of different head coverings that are out there, and I just want to make this clear. There is the hijab, and that's the one where the head and face are covered. This is reserved often for married women, and so that one is that one's the full covering. There's also the just the the basic head covering where only the face is exposed. I don't know if has anyone ever seen that? Okay, so that is something that's more of a Middle Eastern cultural thing, and that is done. It's originally done, to keep the sun off and everything else, but they view that as like part of their makeup. And so, in fact, I remember talking to I was talking to a young lady on Mount Nebo, and she was explaining it to me. She said, I wear this like Western women wear lipstick. I would not go out without this because it makes me beautiful. And Western women, for some reason, put lipstick on because they think it makes them beautiful. So I thought it odd that they, I thought it was just really neat that, both sides see the different things differently, but both sides were actually looking at it.
It's unique perspective.
Yeah, it was, and it was a great explanation by this young lady. But the hijab, that's more, that is more from a Islamic perspective. So that one, the full covering, there's some sects of Islam which will require that. And then also we have the mindfulness movement. This is another big one as well. So you can see one of the big champions there is Yoga with Adrienne. My daughter does this every day. I think her dog's cool. But the mindfulness movement has some things like some guided meditation, emphasizes breathing and some openness, some stillfulness. The mindfulness movement also has a it has the maxim of saying that like stress is held within the body, And so to be in the moment and to concentrate on breathing, but then slow you down and help cope with that. Uh, and it uses some mindfulness techniques, and also, like in the case of yoga with Adrian, some exercise and things like that to deal with some stress and some coping. Uh, I don't know about some of you, but I've seen where some things like mindfulness and yoga has been integrated into some of the curriculum or daily life, how you call it, in some residential care facilities for recovery, and that has met with some great success. So
They've integrated yoga into occupational therapy.
yes, there as well. So I think there's a lot of things here that can be taken into a number of settings, and we'll see a lot of these things grow. Um, so we'll see a lot of these things grow in the future. All right. So are there any questions? I know you will always think of the best question 24 hours later, right? So if that is the case with you, feel free to send me an email, things, whether it's on an assignment or any of the material that we have here.
Faith-based agencies, if you want to, like, say you want to do, you're unsure about your career path, exactly choice.
Mhm.
Do you have to be religious to really excel in the faith-based agencies?
No, no. There, that's a very good question. Okay. There are what's called, let me just give you just a couple of definitions here. There's what's called church ministries, which would be like basically out of a church, sponsored out of a
Mhm.
church. And there's what's called parachurch ministries. And this would be uh, people of a faith group who are doing a ministry or service or program. And I think Celebrate Recovery started like this as more of a
I would say
parachurch.
there's Celebrate Recovery
Yeah.
and Liberty.
So I think they started like that and then kind of morphed into what they are now. There's a lot where maybe people in an area, some people who are involved with a few churches might have some ideas and then start addressing those. Brianna's Hope is a good example where there were several pastors of rural congregations, and one of them really led the way in approaching some people who were struggling with addiction, and then saying, hey, what would a support group look like? And then, going on, and then trying to make something that was a little bit different and really kind of hit as a link in a chain for recovery. And then that kind of spread, sort of a grassroots thing. And now it's grown into a larger, grown from a parachurch to more of a nonprofit organization. So, and that's kind of how they grow. Now, is everyone involved with that organization are religious? Absolutely not.
And I think you should be respectful no matter what.
Yes, yeah, and because at the end of the day, you want to be respectful towards everyone. I don't care what they believe in. You still want to show some respect and kindness. There's actually no reason not to, and because your grandma would yell at you, right? Okay. So no, you don't
Or
have to.
you wouldn't be so lonely if you go to church.
Right. There, you don't have to adhere to a certain faith to be involved there, and to excel in that. There are several, as I said, faith-based organizations. One good example here locally would be Bridges to Life with Tim Pearson. Tim has he's been he used to be a minister, and now he's more community activist, and he has several nonprofits which he has started up. And the reason that he would be considered faith-based is because all of his offices and everything, there was a church that gave him room that said, here, just, have this half of the building. And so he like started COVID relief packages. He has a youth coalition that he does and some other things that he does, but has to have offices, has to have room to store inventory and things like that.
Right.
And so that all has to do with the place there. But all of his work he does with area businesses and things of that nature.
See, that was actually why I asked, because that's who I'm on a job shadow. And I had a meeting with him yesterday, but the night before I was sitting there asking my husband, is it wrong of me to ask if you have to go to this church to be involved? He's like, I wouldn't word it that way, but.
No, and the thing is, I would be totally open about things if you're wondering, but no, not at all. And like I said, there's organizations such as prison, the prison fellowship ministry that will do a number of things. And I mean, there's a number of people involved with that organization that are not, quote unquote religious. So, but things like their angel tree, lobbying for some prison safety, launching some programs that's trying to get prisoners jobs and things like that when they're coming out. I mean, dude, that's all good stuff. It's just one of those things where some people will come along and they're like, well, don't want to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to join what they're doing and see what they can do, because they are sort of a national thing. So no, whether it's with a Christian group or a Muslim group, the thing that you would do is ask that group if there has to be if there's certain stipulations. They'll let you know, but normally they'll have some things posted. But normally no.
Right.
Yeah, I can tell you that it depends also like on the area. You can have many places will have what's called a ministerial organization where leaders of faith groups will meet to address like community issues. And they use that not only for communication, but also cooperation, so that they can all like better coordinate their volunteer bases to address certain issues at certain times. So yeah, there's a number of things out there, but no, you don't. For most of them, in fact, I can't even really think of one off the top of my head where you have to be like the church member in order to participate.
That was just something that's kind of been on my mind a little bit about it.
Oh yeah, and like I said, you just ask people anyway. Remember this. In the West, yes, it's a little taboo to bring up stuff like that. It's always seems
yeah.
like
So I just went in with like open-mindedness and just listening.
Yeah. But if you go in the East, and like I said, I studied over in the Middle East for a semester, totally different. Totally different. It's completely expected, and everybody's like cool. But if you're not talking about it, you're weird. So it's just a different culture. So
right,
that's fine. Like I said, if you don't have any questions, you can go ahead and jump off of here, and that's fine. Tempest, want to touch base with you just real quick?
Okay.
All right. On your stuff. Okay, you're looking at House Ruth?
Yep.
Okay, now House Ruth is a good one. Do you have a contact for that?
I was thinking, because my sister used to go there, her dad actually, I guess, still talks to, I want to say her name is Sharon. Am I wrong?
No, Sharon Cranfill, I think.
I think. I don't know. I know he used to have a contact number for them, but I don't know if he does anymore. So if you actually have a contact number for them.
That's why I wanted you to stay. I think I got it for you. Yeah, they will also do. Now I got to figure out the chat, right? Oh my gosh, idiot. Um, okay. Let's see. I really wish I had the email for that. I don't think I do.
Yeah.
I might.